When my sister and I left the orphanage, all we inherited was 500 acres of forgotten land and a single rusted Quonset hut. What we found inside would force us to choose between a life of freedom and a legacy of truth. And if you've ever felt like your entire life was decided for you, I think you'll want to stick around for this one. If our story helps even one person feel a little less alone, then hitting that subscribe button helps us reach them. The day I turned 18 was the day the state officially ran out of patience with me. It wasn't a celebration. There was no cake, no off-key singing. There was just a cardboard box containing 2 changes of clothes, a worn copy of a book my mother used to read, and a manila envelope that felt both too light and too heavy at the same time. This was it, the sum total of my existence, packed and sealed by the same system that had raised me. My sister, Lily, stood beside me, her small hand clutched in mine. At 14, she was still 4 years from her own eviction date. But where I went, she went. That was the only rule I'd ever truly lived by. They'd tried to separate us once, years ago, after the accident that took our parents. I was 10. I didn't eat for 3 days. They put us back in the same room. Some victories are quiet, but they anchor you just the same. Mrs. Gable, the facility director, stood by the door of her office, her arms crossed. Her expression was the same one she wore for everything. Budget cuts, broken windows, broken kids. It was a flat, unreadable mask of weary bureaucracy. "Leo," she said, her voice like gravel in a tin can. "The papers are signed. You're legally an adult. Your sister is your ward, pending quarterly state reviews. Don't mess this up." I nodded. Words felt useless. What could I say? Thank you for the scheduled meals and the threadbare blankets. Thank you for reminding me every day that I was a line item in a budget. I just squeezed Lily's hand tighter. "The lawyer is waiting for you," she added, gesturing with her chin toward a small, windowless room they called the Family Conference Center. It was where adoptions were finalized and where parental rights were terminated. A room for beginnings and endings. We'd seen our share of both. The lawyer was a man named Arthur Abernathy. He was old, with a suit that seemed a size too big for his shrinking frame, and kind, tired eyes. He didn't look like he belonged in the sterile, beige world of the Northwood State Children's Home. He smelled of old paper and peppermint, a scent so out of place it was almost comforting. He shook my hand. His grip was surprisingly firm. "Leo, I'm Arthur Abernathy. I was your grandfather's attorney." Grandfather. The word felt foreign. Samuel Vance. I knew the name from a file, a ghost who had died shortly after our parents. We'd never met him, not that I could remember. The state had deemed him an unsuitable guardian at the time, for reasons lost in redacted paperwork. "He left you something," Mr. Abernathy said, tapping the manila envelope I was still clutching. "It's not much, I'm afraid. Samuel, he didn't have a lot of liquid assets." I opened the envelope. Inside was a deed, brittle and yellowed at the edges. The legal language was dense, but a few words jumped out. 512 acres, unincorporated territory, County of Grayling, and our names, Leo and Lily Vance, listed as the sole beneficiaries. 500 acres. It sounded like a kingdom. For a boy whose entire world had been a series of dorm rooms and cafeterias, it was an unimaginable expanse. Is this real?" I asked. my voice cracking. "It's real," he confirmed, with a sad little smile. "But I need to manage your expectations, son. The land is remote. The soil is poor. It hasn't been farmed in 20 years. The property taxes are minimal, but they exist. And the farmhouse itself, well, it collapsed in a snowstorm a decade ago. It's been condemned." My heart sank. A kingdom of dirt and splinters. "So it's worthless," I said, the hope draining out of me as quickly as it had come. "Financially? For the most part," he conceded. "Developers have no interest in the area. It's too far from anything. The only standing structure is an old Quonset hut your grandfather used for storage." He slid a single, rust-pitted key across the table. "This is for the lock. Samuel was very specific that you get the key." A key to a shed on a worthless patch of land. This was our inheritance, a final cosmic joke. Lily looked up at me, her eyes wide. She wasn't seeing the worthless dirt or the collapsed house. She was seeing an escape, an away, a place that wasn't this. "Can we go there, Leo?" she whispered. "Can we go see it?" I looked from her hopeful face to Mr. Abernathy's pitying one. We had $74 in a state-issued debit card and a bus ticket to a town I'd never heard of. We had no other options. No family, no prospects, no safety net. All we had was each other, and now a kingdom of dirt. "Yeah, Lily," I said, forcing a confidence I didn't feel. "We can go see it. It's ours." Mr. Abernathy gave me a long, searching look. "Your grandfather was a good man, Leo. Complicated, but good. He loved you and your sister very much. He told me once, he said that what he was leaving you wasn't about money. He said it was about a choice." I didn't understand what he meant. What choice? The choice between starving in the city or starving in the country? But I nodded anyway. I thanked him, and he gave me a card with his number on it. "Call me if you need anything," he said. "Anything at all." As Lily and I walked out of the Northwood State Children's Home for the last time, the automatic doors sliding shut behind us with a pneumatic hiss, I felt a terrifying, exhilarating wave of panic and freedom. For the first time in my life, there was no one to tell me where to go, what to do, when to sleep. The path wasn't just unclear, it didn't exist. We had to cut it ourselves, starting now, with a bus ticket to nowhere and a key to a metal shed. The future was a blank page, and it was terrifying. The bus ride was a long, rumbling journey from one world to another. We left behind the familiar gray grid of the city, the endless rows of concrete and brick, and watched as it slowly dissolved into the greens and browns of the countryside. For hours, Lily pressed her face against the window, her breath fogging the glass, mesmerized by the sheer emptiness of it all. To her, it wasn't empty. It was open. It was space. It was everything our lives had never been. I spent most of the ride looking at the deed, then at the key in my palm. The metal was cold and slightly greasy, its teeth worn smooth with time. A key is a promise. It suggests something is waiting to be opened, a secret waiting to be told. But it can also be a dead end, a lock to a room that holds nothing but dust and disappointment. I was braced for the latter. We got off at a crossroads with a single blinking yellow light. The town of Grayling, according to the sign, had a population of 417. The bus station was a wooden bench next to a gas station with one working pump. The air smelled different here, clean, sharp, with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. It was so quiet I could hear the buzz of a fly and the frantic beating of my own heart. A man in greasy overalls at the gas station gave us directions. "The old Vance place? Sure. It's about 5 miles up that road," he said, pointing a thumb down a crumbling asphalt lane that disappeared into a thick stand of trees. "Nobody's been out there in years. You family?" "Grandchildren," I said. He grunted, a non-committal sound that could have been sympathy or disinterest. "Bus don't go that way. You'll have to walk it." And so we walked. With my cardboard box under one arm and Lily's small backpack slung over my shoulder, we started down the road. The 5 miles felt like 100. The silence of the country wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, pressing in on us. Every rustle in the woods sounded like a threat. Every shadow seemed to move. We were city kids, used to the constant, anonymous noise of traffic and sirens. This quiet felt loud, and it spoke a language we didn't understand. Finally, we saw it. A rusted mailbox tilted on its post like a tired old man. The name VANCE barely visible under layers of rust and grime. A dirt driveway, more of a suggestion than a road, was choked with weeds and vanished into a meadow. This was it. Home. The word caught in my throat. We pushed through the tall grass, our sneakers soaked with dew. The first thing we saw were the ruins of the farmhouse. Mr. Abernathy hadn't exaggerated. It was a skeleton, a collapsed heap of splintered wood and broken shingles, slowly being reclaimed by ivy and wildflowers. A chimney stood stubbornly intact, a lonely monument to a home that no longer existed. It was a heartbreaking sight. This could have been where we grew up. This could have been our history. Instead, it was just debris. And then, beyond the ruins, we saw it. The Quonset hut. It sat on a concrete slab at the edge of a vast, overgrown field. It was bigger than I'd imagined, a long, curved structure of corrugated metal. Its surface was a patchwork of angry red rust and faded, peeling gray paint. It looked like the carcass of some great metal beast that had laid down to die in this field decades ago. It was ugly and imposing, and it was the only thing we had in the entire world. "That's it?" Lily asked, her voice small. "That's our house?" "It's not a house, Lily. It's storage," I corrected her gently, though my own disappointment was a bitter taste in my mouth. We circled it. There was one large sliding door on the front, held shut by a thick chain and a heavy-duty padlock. It looked ancient and formidable. I pulled the key from my pocket. My hand was trembling slightly as I slid it into the lock. For a second, it wouldn't turn. My stomach clenched with the familiar dread of failure. I jiggled it, pushed harder, and then, with a grating screech that echoed across the silent fields, the lock clicked open. The chain fell away, heavy and loud in the quiet air. Together, Lily and I put our shoulders to the door. It resisted, groaning in protest, its rollers seized with rust. We pushed harder, grunting with the effort, and slowly, inch by painful inch, it began to slide open. A sliver of darkness appeared, then widened. A wave of cool, musty air washed over us. It smelled of packed earth, motor oil, and something else. Something that smelled like time itself. The inside was a cavern of shadows. The only light came from the opening we'd created and a few grimy, semicircular windows high up on the curved walls. As our eyes adjusted, shapes began to emerge from the gloom. Old farm equipment stood draped in dusty canvas tarps like sleeping giants. Stacks of wooden crates were piled against one wall. Shelves overflowed with glass jars, tins, and tools, each object coated in a thick, uniform layer of dust. It was a tomb, a museum of a life that had ended 20 years ago. Lily, ever the explorer, ventured in first. "It's huge," she breathed, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. I followed, my footsteps stirring up little clouds of dust that danced in the slanted shafts of light. It was overwhelming. Every object in here had belonged to our grandfather. Every tool had been held in his hands. This was the closest we'd ever been to him, and yet he was a complete stranger. We spent the next hour just looking. We pulled tarps off machinery that looked like medieval torture devices to us. We peered into crates filled with things we couldn't identify. It was a testament to a life of hard work, a life completely alien to our own. But there was nothing of value, nothing to sell, nothing to help us survive, just old junk. The disappointment was beginning to settle in, cold and heavy, when Lily called out to me. "Leo, come look at this." She was at the far end of the hut, in the deepest shadows. She was pointing at the floor. A section of the concrete slab looked different. It was a perfectly square section, about 3 feet by 3 feet, and the concrete was a slightly lighter shade of gray. There were no cracks in it, unlike the rest of the floor, and along one edge I could just make out a thin, dark line, like a seam. I knelt down, my fingers tracing the line. It was a cut. A precise, deliberate cut. I pushed on the edge of the square. Nothing. I ran my hands over the surface, feeling for any kind of latch or handle. And then my fingers brushed against it. A tiny, recessed metal ring, almost invisible, set flush with the concrete and filled with dust. I dug the dirt out with my fingernail, hooked a finger through the ring, and pulled. It was incredibly heavy, but with a deep groan of protest, the concrete slab lifted. It was a trapdoor. Beneath it was a dark, square hole, a small cellar, a hidden space. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This was it. This had to be it. Whatever choice Mr. Abernathy had talked about, whatever secret this place held, it was down there. I found an old flashlight on a shelf. After a few hard smacks against my palm, its beam flickered to life, weak and yellow. I shone it down into the hole. The space was small, maybe 6 feet deep, with a packed earth floor. And in the center of that small, hidden space sat a single object, a heavy, dark green, military-style ammunition box. It was locked not with a key, but with a combination dial. A new wave of frustration washed over me. A locked box, a combination we could never guess. It felt like another dead end. Lily, however, was looking at the underside of the concrete lid I was holding up. "Leo," she said, her voice hushed with discovery. "Look." I angled the flashlight beam where she was pointing. Scratched crudely into the concrete, almost invisible, were a series of 6 numbers. A date. Our mother's birthday. My breath caught in my chest. He hadn't just left us a puzzle. He'd left us the key, a key made of a memory he knew we would carry. I carefully lowered myself into the hole, the damp, cold air seeping into my jeans. The ammo box was heavier than it looked. I lifted it out and set it on the floor of the hut. The metal was cold to the touch. With trembling fingers, I began to turn the dial. Right to the first number. Left past it to the second. Right to the third. Each click of the mechanism felt deafeningly loud. After the last number, I pulled on the latch. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a solid, satisfying thunk, it released. I lifted the heavy lid. I think some part of me, the part that had been raised on stories and movies, expected to see stacks of cash, or gold bars, or jewels, something that would solve all our problems in an instant. But it wasn't that. The box was filled almost to the brim with envelopes, dozens of them, bundled together with twine, all addressed in the same spidery, faded blue ink. To Leo and Lily, and underneath the letters, wrapped in oilcloth, was a thick ledger book and a small, reel-to-reel audio tape. There was no money. There was only a story. I picked up the first bundle of letters. On top was a single, unsealed envelope. The paper was thick and creamy, and my name was written on it in my grandfather's hand. I opened it. The letter inside was dated just a few weeks before his death. My hands shook as I began to read his words aloud, my voice echoing in the silent, dusty tomb he had built. "My dearest Leo," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am long gone, and you are a man. I am sorry. I am sorry for so many things. I am sorry I wasn't there to watch you grow. I am sorry I couldn't protect you from the hardness of the world. I failed you in that. But I pray that what I have left you here will, in the end, be a greater protection than I could ever have offered in person. You have inherited this land. To the world, it is worthless. I have made sure of that. For 20 years I have worked to make it seem forgotten, barren, and unprofitable. This was not neglect, son. It was a shield." My eyes scanned the page, my heart pounding faster with every word. Lily had moved closer, her hand resting on my arm, reading along with me. "Years ago, long before you were born, a company came to this valley. They called themselves Viridian Holdings. They promised jobs, prosperity. They wanted to build a state-of-the-art waste disposal facility. They bought up land from all our neighbors, offering prices no one could refuse. But I refused. This land has been in our family for 100 years. It felt wrong. So I dug into them. I found out the truth. They weren't building a disposal facility. They were a front for something much dirtier. They had contracts to dispose of highly toxic industrial and chemical byproducts, and they were planning to bury it here, deep in the earth, where they thought no one would ever know. It would have poisoned the water for 100 miles. It would have poisoned everything." He went on to describe his fight, how he gathered evidence, how he tried to warn people, but Viridian's lawyers were too powerful. They buried him in lawsuits, threatened him, and turned the community against him. He was just one old farmer against a faceless corporation with bottomless pockets. He was losing. "And then," the letter continued, "the accident happened. Your parents were gone, and you and Lily, you were all I had left. They knew it. Viridian knew they had me. They came to me with a deal. I would drop my fight. I would destroy all my evidence. I would let my farm go to ruin, so no one would ever want this land again. In exchange, they would leave this valley forever. And they would leave my family alone. They would let you live your lives, untouched by any of this. It was a choice, Leo. Your safety or my pride, my land or my blood. It wasn't a choice at all. I took the deal." I had to stop reading. A sob caught in my throat. All these years, we'd thought we were abandoned. We'd felt like orphans, forgotten by the world, by any family we might have had. But we weren't forgotten. We were protected. Our grandfather's absence, the poverty, the state home. It was all the price he had paid to keep us safe. It was a sacrifice we never even knew had been made. I took a shaky breath and continued reading. "But I didn't destroy the evidence. I couldn't. It's all here in this box." The real shipping manifests, the soil sample results I paid a university to analyze, sworn affidavits from 2 former employees who were brave enough to talk to me. It's all in the ledger. The audio tape is a recording of their final offer, their threat. It is my proof, and it is now your burden. Viridian is still out there. They are bigger now, more powerful. They have likely been watching this property, waiting for me to die, waiting for the land to pass to someone who doesn't know its secret, someone who would sell it to them for a pittance. They will come for this land, Leo. Sooner or later, they will come, and they will offer you a fortune for it. Enough money to change your life forever. Enough to give you and your sister everything you've never had. The page ended there. I looked at Lily. Her face was pale, streaked with tears. The silence in the Quonset hut was heavy with the weight of our grandfather's words. He hadn't left us a kingdom of dirt. He had left us a battlefield and a choice. "What does it mean, Leo?" Lily whispered. "It means," I said, my voice hoarse, "that we have a story to finish." We spent the rest of that day and the next in the hut. We built a small fire outside to keep warm at night, sleeping on old canvas tarps that smelled of dust and history. We devoured our grandfather's letters. There were dozens of them. Letters he wrote to us on our birthdays, on holidays. Letters filled with stories about our parents we'd never heard. Advice he wished he could give us, and apologies for the life we were forced to live. He wrote about his love for the land, for the way the sun set over the western ridge, for the smell of the air after a thunderstorm. He poured his entire soul into those pages, a ghost trying to be a grandfather from beyond the grave. We cried. I cried for the man I never knew, for the years we'd lost. I cried for the weight of the secret he'd carried alone for so long. And I cried for the 2 scared kids sitting in a dusty shed who now had to carry it themselves. The ledger was exactly what he'd said. It was meticulous, damning. Page after page of dates, chemical names, and shipping codes, cross-referenced with illegal dumping sites. The affidavits were notarized and terrifying, detailing threats and cover-ups. We didn't have a way to play the audio tape, but we didn't need to. We had enough. We had the truth. On the 3rd day, a car came down the long driveway. It wasn't a beat-up farm truck. It was a sleek black sedan that looked as out of place here as a spaceship. A man in an expensive suit got out. He was holding a briefcase. He didn't look like a lawyer. He looked like a wolf. "Leo Vance?" he asked, his smile not reaching his cold, assessing eyes. I nodded, stepping in front of Lily protectively. "My name is Mr. Jensen. I represent a consortium of investors who are interested in acquiring undeveloped rural properties. We can offer you a substantial sum for these 500 acres, a life-changing sum." He opened his briefcase. Inside was a contract. I didn't need to read the fine print. I could see the number at the top. It had a lot of zeros. More money than I had ever dreamed of. Enough to buy a real house, a car, to send Lily to any college she wanted. Enough to erase every day we'd ever spent in the Northwood State Children's Home. It was the future, served up on a silver platter. $2 million, he said, his voice smooth as oil. "All you have to do is sign. We take the land and you walk away, free and clear." This was it. The moment our grandfather had predicted, the choice. I could feel Lily's fear beside me. I could feel the gnawing hunger in my own stomach. The memory of every cold night, every worn-out pair of shoes. $2 million could buy a lot of safety. It could buy a lot of forgetting. I looked from the man's polished shoes to the crumbling ruins of our family's home. I thought of my grandfather, alone in this field, choosing his family over his fight. He hadn't given up the fight, though. He'd just passed the torch. He'd trusted me to carry it. He'd trusted me, a boy he'd never met, to understand that some things weren't for sale. That an inheritance wasn't a dollar amount, but a responsibility. That home wasn't a building, but a piece of ground you stood on, a line you refused to let anyone cross. And in that moment, the choice wasn't hard at all. It was the only choice there was. "The land's not for sale," I said. My voice was steady. For the first time in my life, it didn't shake. The man's smile tightened. It was a small, almost imperceptible change, but the friendliness vanished completely, replaced by a cold, hard threat. "I think you should reconsider, son. An opportunity like this doesn't come twice. This land is worthless. Taking our offer is the smart play." "I'm not interested in the smart play," I told him. "I'm interested in doing the right thing. Now get off my property." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes boring into mine, searching for a weakness he couldn't find. He snapped his briefcase shut. "You're making a mistake, kid," he said, the words clipped and sharp. "A very big mistake." He got back in his car, and it crunched its way back down our overgrown driveway, leaving behind only a cloud of dust and the heavy silence of the valley. When he was gone, Lily turned to me, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear and pride. "What do we do now, Leo?" I looked at the rusted Quonset hut, at the box of truth sitting inside, at the vast, wild land stretching out before us. It was overwhelming. We were just two kids against a giant, but we weren't alone. We had the ghost of a good, complicated man standing with us. "Now," I said, feeling a sense of purpose solidify inside me, hard as steel. "Now, we fight." The first call I made was to Arthur Abernathy. I explained everything, my voice tumbling out, fast and urgent. The trap door, the ammo box, the letters. I read him excerpts from our grandfather's confession, described the ledger, told him about the man in the black car and the $2 million offer we had just refused. For a long time after I finished, the only sound on the line was a faint, crackling static. I thought maybe he'd hung up. "Mr. Abernathy?" I asked, my stomach twisting into a knot. "Are you still there?" "I'm here, son," he finally said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite place. It sounded like awe, and maybe a little bit of fear. "I knew Samuel was a stubborn old goat, but I never knew the half of it. He played the long game. My God, he played the long game." "What do we do?" I asked, the bravado I'd felt in front of Mr. Jensen already starting to fray at the edges. "We have the proof, but they're a massive company. They could crush us." "No, they won't," Mr. Abernathy said, and his voice was different now. The tired, weary tone was gone, replaced by the sharp, focused energy of a lawyer who smelled blood in the water. "They won't crush you because they can't afford for any of this to see the light of day. A threat is one thing, a public fight is another. They've been operating on the assumption that this secret died with your grandfather. They were wrong." He told me what to do. He instructed me to make copies of everything, to take photos of every page of the ledger with the cheap phone the state had given me. He told me to hide the original box somewhere off the property, somewhere safe. He said he would contact a journalist he trusted, someone at a national paper who specialized in environmental crimes. He also said he'd reach out to the state's Environmental Protection Agency. "This is bigger than just your land now, Leo," he said. "This is about what they did to the whole valley. what they might still be doing elsewhere. Your grandfather didn't just leave you a shield, he left you a sword. The next few weeks were a blur of frantic activity and nervous waiting. We found a small motel in Grayling to stay in, a shabby place with a flickering neon sign and questionable plumbing, paid for with the last of our state money. It felt safer than being isolated on the farm. We spent a day at the local library, using their scanner to digitize every single document, every letter, every affidavit. We uploaded the encrypted files to a secure cloud server and sent the password to Mr. Abernathy in a separate message. I took the original ammo box, wrapped it in plastic, and buried it deep in the woods, miles from our land, marking the spot on a map that only I had. We were living on cheap noodles and adrenaline. Every time a car slowed down outside the motel, my heart leaped into my throat. Lily was scared, but she was also brave. She helped me organize the files, her small hands carefully handling the brittle pages. She was my partner in this, not just my ward. She was the reason I had to see it through. The call from Viridian's lawyers came a week later. It wasn't the smooth Mr. Jensen this time. It was a woman with a voice like splintered ice. She didn't bother with pleasantries. She told me their previous offer was rescinded. She accused us of trespassing on land that was, for all intents and purposes, a public liability. She threatened to have us evicted, to have Lily put back in the state's care. "You have nothing, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You are a legal adult with no assets, no income, and a minor to care for. The state will deem you unfit in a heartbeat. Walk away now, and we will forget this whole unfortunate interaction." I held the phone, my hand slick with sweat. This was the fear tactic, the part where they tried to break me. But hearing our grandfather's voice in my head, reading his words, had changed me. I wasn't just an orphan from a state home anymore. I was Samuel Vance's grandson. "I have my grandfather's records," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I have the ledger, I have the tape, and I've already made copies." The silence on the other end was more satisfying than any shouting match could ever have been. "I'm sure that's not possible," she said, but the ice in her voice had a hairline crack in it. "You have 48 hours to accept a final offer," she said. $500,000 and a legally binding non-disclosure agreement. After that, we will proceed with legal action against you for extortion." She hung up. 500,000. Even their panic offer was a fortune. But it came with a price. Silence. It meant letting them get away with it. It meant my grandfather's sacrifice would be for nothing. It meant the truth would stay buried forever. Have you ever been at a crossroads like that, where one path is easy, paved with gold, and the other is rocky and steep and leads into darkness? But you just know in your bones that it's the right way to go? That's a lonely place to be. If you're there right now, or you've been there before, I want you to know that you're not alone. This community we're building here, it's for people who choose the hard path. It's for people who know that your integrity is the one thing no one can buy. I looked at the phone, then at Lily, who was watching me with wide, trusting eyes. "We're not taking it," I said, and she just nodded, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The story broke 3 weeks later. It was a front-page article in a major national newspaper. A 20-year-old secret, how Viridian Holdings buried more than just waste. Our grandfather's story was finally told. The article included scanned images from his ledger, quotes from the affidavits, and a detailed analysis by environmental experts. Mr. Abernathy had done his job. The journalist had done hers. And our grandfather, 20 years after his death, finally had his voice heard. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Viridian. Their stock plummeted. The state EPA launched a massive investigation. Federal charges were filed. It turned out this wasn't an isolated incident. It was their business model. Our grandfather's little black box of truth ended up unraveling a nationwide criminal conspiracy. We were never the targets of their threats again. We were just the two kids who had lit the fuse. In the end, there was a settlement. Viridian, under new management and facing ruin, created a massive environmental cleanup and restitution fund. A significant portion of it was allocated to the restoration of Grayling County. And a part of that, a court-ordered settlement for the decades of harassment and damage done to the Vance family, was given to us. It wasn't the $2 million in hush money. It was less than that. But it was clean. It was justice. And it was more than enough. We didn't buy a new house in the city. We didn't run away. We went back to the farm. We used the money to clear the rubble of the old farmhouse and, piece by piece, to build a new one, right on the old foundation. It was small, but it was solid. It had big windows that looked out over the fields. We hired a local crew to help us, men whose fathers had known our grandfather. They told us stories about him, about his stubbornness, his integrity. They told us he would be proud. We fixed up the Quonset hut, gave it a new coat of paint, and turned it into a proper workshop. We started the long, arduous process of healing the land itself. We had soil experts come in. Thankfully, our property had been spared the worst of the dumping, a testament to our grandfather's successful, silent resistance. The work was hard. Waking up at dawn, mending fences, learning to cultivate soil that hadn't been touched in a generation. There were days I was so tired my bones ached, days I was sure we'd made a terrible mistake. But then I'd see Lily, walking through the fields with a wildflower in her hair, no longer the scared, quiet girl from the institution, but a confident young woman with dirt under her fingernails and a future in her eyes. And I knew we were home. One evening, about a year after we'd moved in, I was sitting on the porch of our new house, watching the sunset paint the western ridge in shades of orange and purple. The air smelled of freshly cut hay and damp earth. It was the smell my grandfather had written about in his letters. Mr. Abernathy had come by to drop off some final papers. He was retired now, but he still drove out to see us every few weeks. He sat in the rocking chair beside me, sipping the iced tea Lily had made. "He would have liked this," he said quietly, looking out at the land. "Seeing you two here, seeing this place come back to life." "He should have been here," I said, the old ache of his absence still a dull throb in my chest. "He deserved to see it." "In a way, he is," Mr. Abernathy replied, a gentle smile on his face. "This was his real legacy, Leo. Not the fight, not the evidence. You and your sister. The fact that you're here, that you're safe, that you made the right choice when it mattered most. That's how he lives on." I thought about the word inheritance. For most of my life, it had been a hollow word, something that happened to other people. I thought it meant money or property, a thing you were given. But sitting on that porch, on the land my family had held for over a century, I finally understood. An inheritance isn't just something you receive, it's something you accept. It's a story that you choose to become a part of. It's the burdens and the blessings of the people who came before you, and the responsibility to carry their best parts into the future. Our grandfather didn't leave us 500 acres of worthless land. He left us a test of character. He left us a chance to learn who we were, to fight for something that mattered, and to build a home not from wood and nails, but from resilience and truth and love. And that is a fortune that no amount of money can ever buy. What our story taught me is that the most valuable things are never the easiest. Home isn't just a place you live, it's a place you fight for, a place you build, a place you earn. Family isn't just about blood, it's about the promises you keep and the sacrifices you're willing to make for each other. And sometimes, the greatest treasures are buried in the last place you'd ever think to look, hidden inside a rusted old shed, waiting for someone to come along who is brave enough to turn the key. So I want to ask you, what has your life taught you about the meaning of home? What's the inheritance, not of money, but of values that you carry with you? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one because your stories matter. They are a part of this community, a part of what makes this space a home for people who have been through the fire and come out stronger on the other side. Thank you for listening, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. We're all in this together.